Mr. Corsetti, your daughter is lying in an alley behind my diner. She won't wake up. Please, you have to come now. The line went dead silent, not because Dominic Corsetti had nothing to say, but because for the first time in 22 years, the most feared man in this city couldn't breathe. He had buried rivals. He had burned empires. He had sat across from men with guns pointed at his chest and never once flinched. But a waitress just said his daughter's name, and his entire world collapsed into a single alley on 5th Street. Subscribe right now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The phone rang at 11:03 p.m. Dominic Corsetti answered on the first ring, not because he was expecting a call, but because men like him never ignored ringing phones. In his world, silence was a luxury. Noise was always information. He was in the middle of something. A conversation with two of his senior people about a shipment moving through the port on Thursday. Numbers on a table, names on a list, the ordinary machinery of a life built on controlled violence and precise calculation. The voice that came through the phone was not part of that world. Young, female, shaking so badly at the edges that the words almost didn't form correctly. Mr. Corsetti, I'm so sorry. My name is Elena. I work at Sal's Diner on 5th Avenue. I found your daughter. She's in the alley behind the building. She's breathing, but she won't wake up. I've been trying to get her to respond for almost 20 minutes and stop. One word, flat as a wall. The room went silent. Both men at the table stopped talking mid-sentence. Marco, who had worked beside Dominic for 11 years and had seen things that would end. Most men looked up from his paperwork with an expression that shifted the moment he saw his boss's face. Dominic was not a man whose face changed. That was something people said about him, not as a compliment and a warning. His face was a closed door, locked, reinforced. You didn't read Dominic Corsetti, you read the aftermath. But right now something was happening behind his eyes that Marco had never seen before. Something that had no name in the vocabulary of this business. Say her name again, Dominic said into the phone. His voice had dropped to a register so low it was almost not sound at all. Lily, the girl whispered. Her ID says Lily Corsetti, and your number was her emergency contact. I didn't call 911 because her last name is Corsetti, and I thought maybe she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The fact that she had stopped herself, that she had understood in the span of 20 minutes alone in a dark alley, that the name Corsetti came with protocols that ordinary emergencies did not told Dominic more about this girl than most people revealed in a year. Is anyone else with you? No, just me. Does anyone else know you called this number? No. Don't move her. Don't call anyone. Go back inside the diner, lock the kitchen door, and stay where you can see the alley through the window. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up. He was already moving. Car, now. He said it to Marco without looking at him. He was already dialing a second number, Dr. Renata Aguilar, who kept an off-record clinic 4 blocks from the waterfront, and who had, over the course of a 15-year relationship with Dominic Corsetti, learned that when his number appeared on her phone after 10 p.m., she packed her bag before answering. She answered on the second ring. Dominic, I need you at Sal's Diner on 5th in 12 minutes. Bring everything. A pause, brief, professional. Is it serious? It's Lily. He heard the sound of her moving before he ended the call. The drive took 9 minutes. Dominic sat in the back seat and did not speak and did not look at his phone and did not look out the window. He stared at a fixed point somewhere in the middle distance, and he breathed slowly, deliberately in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way he had trained himself to breathe in the years when he was still learning how to be the kind of man he had become. His hands were flat on his thighs. He noticed distantly that they were shaking. That had never happened before. In his entire adult life, under every conceivable form of pressure, his hands had never shaken. He pressed them harder against his legs and looked at the fixed point and breathed. Lily was 19. She was studying English literature at the university on the north side of the city. She lived in a building Dominic had personally assessed security exits, sightlines, the backgrounds of every staff member. She had a modified curfew that she resented and argued against every time it came up. She had her mother's eyes and her mother's stubbornness and her mother's complete refusal to be intimidated by him, even when intimidation was the only language left in the room. Her mother had been gone for 7 years. Lily was all he had left of anything that wasn't. This wasn't the table and the numbers and the names on the list and the carefully maintained empire of violence and money that had eaten his entire life from the inside out. He had told himself every year that keeping her safe was enough, that the money and the security and the removal of every possible threat from her path, that this was love, that she would understand eventually when she was old enough to see the whole picture. She was 19. She was old enough. She called him Dominic when she was angry with him, which was most of the time now. Their last conversation had been 6 days ago. It had started as a phone call about her tuition payment and ended with her voice going cold and quiet in a way that was worse than shouting, "I don't need you to manage my life, Dominic. I need you to be present in it. Those are two different things." And then the call ending. He had not called back. "Pull up at the alley entrance," Dominic said. Marco swung the car in. The headlights swept the narrow space, and then Dominic saw her Lily, and he was out of the vehicle before it stopped moving. She was against the wall, half sitting, half crumpled, one shoe on one missing, hair across her face. She looked impossibly small. She looked like she was 12 years old, and he was hit without warning by a memory so specific it almost knocked him sideways. Lily at 12, asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest, and him standing in the doorway watching her sleep, and thinking with the particular clarity of that moment, "This is the only thing I've done right." He was on his knees beside her before he consciously decided to kneel. His hand went to her face. Cold skin, too cold, but the pulse at her throat, he pressed two fingers there hard, was steady, weak but steady. "Lily," he said her name. It came out in a voice he didn't recognize. "Lily, I'm here. I'm right here." Nothing. She was somewhere unreachable, somewhere the sound of his voice couldn't penetrate. "She didn't make any sound after I called you." He turned. The girl was standing 8 feet away, arms crossed over her chest, diner uniform notepad still in her apron pocket. She was watching him with dark eyes that were careful and direct and not performing anything, not fear, not sympathy, not calculation. She was just watching, seeing him exactly as he was kneeling in an alley with his hands on his unconscious daughter's face and not looking away. "Elena," he said, still not a question. "Yes, you found her exactly like this. She had slipped a little from when I first found her. I moved her enough to make sure she wasn't going to fall forward. I hope that was okay. I know you said not to move her, but she was tilting, and I was scared she'd hit the ground." She said it directly and without apology. She had made a judgment call, and she was explaining it without dressing it up. "You did the right thing," Dominic said. Something in Elena's expression shifted, barely visible, a small adjustment, like someone who wasn't used to hearing that. "Did you see anyone in the alley or on the street when you came out?" The alley was empty. There was a car parked on 5th, about half a block up, engine running. Dark blue, maybe black. "I didn't see the driver. It pulled away about 5 minutes before you got here." Dominic looked at her steadily. "You noticed a running car half a block away while you were in the middle of a crisis." "I grew up in a neighborhood where you notice running cars," she said simply. That landed. He filed it. Dr. Aguilar's headlights appeared at the alley entrance. The doctor moved fast, crouching beside Lily, speaking in the clipped, efficient shorthand she used when she was working questions directed at Dominic about when Lily had last been seen when she'd eaten any known conditions. Dominic answered everything he knew and acknowledged what he didn't with a precision that came from long practice at staying functional when everything else was not. "She needs to go to the clinic," Dr. Aguilar said, not looking up. "I can't assess her properly here. Her temperature is low and her pupils aren't responding the way I want them to." "Marco," Dominic was on his feet. "Call ahead, and I want 2 more people at the clinic entrance before we arrive." "Already on it, boss." Dominic turned back to Elena as Marco and Dr. Aguilar carefully lifted Lily and moved her toward the doctor's vehicle. He watched his daughter being carried and kept watching until the door closed, and only then did he look at the girl again. "You said her ID was the reason you called me instead of 911. "That's right. Whose idea was it to keep this quiet?" Elena held his gaze. "It was a guess. I figured a man whose name means something in this city would want to handle this his own way. I didn't want to make a decision that wasn't mine to make. And if you'd been wrong, if I'd been someone who couldn't help her the way a hospital could, Then I would have called 911 the moment you showed up and it was clear you weren't equipped. She said it without hesitation. I wasn't going to let her die to protect your privacy. I was giving you first option. The silence between them stretched for 3 seconds. 5. In Dominic's world, most people filled silences. They rushed to explain themselves, to soften things, to walk back anything that might have sounded like defiance. Elena stood in it perfectly still and let it sit. He reached into his jacket, produced a card, blank face, one handwritten number on the back. He held it out. If anyone asks about tonight, you were taking out trash and found the alley empty. You saw nothing. You know nothing. She took the card, looked at both sides, looked at him. And if I can't say that honestly, Elena, I'm serious. I don't lie well. It's a character flaw. He almost said something. He caught himself. Then say as little as possible and let the silence do the work. You're good at that. She looked at him for a moment like she was deciding something. Then she nodded. One short, clean nod. Professional. Decided. She turned to go. Elena! She stopped. How long were you out here with her before you called me? A pause. 19 minutes. I kept thinking she was about to wake up. And then she said something. Once. Right at the beginning before she went completely under. His entire body went still. What did she say? Elena turned back to face him. Her expression was something he couldn't fully read. She said, Dad, just once, really quietly, like she wasn't sure anyone would hear her. The alley was very quiet. I thought you should know that, Elena said, before you spent one more second thinking she didn't want you here. Then she walked back to the kitchen door and went inside, and the door closed behind her, and Dominic stood alone in the alley with the cold and the dark and the sound of his daughter's voice saying a single word to the empty air. He stood there for a long time. In the clinic, 2 hours later, Dr. Aguilar delivered the verdict in the careful, measured tone she used when the information was serious and the recipient was dangerous. The compound in Lily's system was pharmaceutical grade, not street-sourced, not improvised. Precision calibrated, the dosage engineered to incapacitate without causing damage, to send a message without starting a war. The kind of access required to obtain this substance legally did not exist. Illegally in this city, fewer than 8 people had the connections to source it. This wasn't random, Dr. Aguilar said. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they chose very deliberately not to hurt her. Because hurting her would mean something different, Dominic said. Yes, he nodded. Thank you, Renata. She left him alone with the folder. He sat in the chair beside Lily's bed and looked at the numbers and thought about 8 people. He had a working relationship with 3 of them. He had a standing conflict with 2 more. One of the remaining 3 was a man named Vincent Shade, who had shaken his hand across a dinner table 22 days ago with the particular warmth of someone who knew exactly what he was planning to do next. Dominic opened his phone, typed 2 words to Marco, find Shade. He closed the phone. He looked at his daughter. She stirred at 2:22 a.m. Her eyes came open, slowly confused, scanning the room with the unfocused look of someone trying to reconstruct the world from pieces. When her eyes found him, they stopped moving. Dad? Her voice was rough and small. Right here. She stared at him for a moment. Then quietly, you look terrible. Something moved in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. You have your mother's talent for the obvious. Her face crumpled just for a second, and then she held it together because she had also inherited his refusal to fall apart completely. What happened to me? Someone put something in your drink. You're safe now. You're going to be fine. Someone who... Why would anyone... She stopped. Her eyes changed, the pieces assembling. Because of you. He said nothing. It was because of you, she said again. Not accusing, flat, certain. Whoever did this, it was a message for you. I was the message. Lily, don't. Her voice was very quiet, but it had iron in it. Don't tell me I'm wrong. I know I'm right. I've known for years that this was always possible, and I let myself believe your security measures would be enough. She looked at the ceiling. I let myself believe your world would stay on its side of the line. Dominic had no defense. He had built that line himself, drawn it carefully, maintained it obsessively, and tonight someone had walked across it like it was made of smoke. There's something else, he said. She looked at him. The girl who found you. The waitress. She stayed with you for almost 20 minutes before she called me. She could have left. She could have called emergency services and walked away and had nothing more to do with any of this. Why didn't she? I don't know yet, Dominic said, but I'm going to find out. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, is she okay? The question hit him the same way it had in the alley, like unexpected sunlight. His daughter waking up from being drugged, first question about someone else. She's fine, he said. He paused. She's something, actually, I'm not sure what yet. Lily looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face in a very long time. Open, searching. Dad, what are you going to do? He looked at his daughter. He thought about 8 names and a man named Vincent Shade. He thought about a running car half a block up. He thought about a 24-year-old woman who stood alone in an alley with a dangerous man and asked genuine questions instead of performing fear. Several things, he said, starting tonight. And in a small apartment above a laundromat on the east side of the city, Elena sat on the edge of her bed in the dark, still in her uniform, a blank card turning between her fingers. She had been sitting there for 40 minutes. She was not afraid exactly. She was something more complicated than afraid. She was already involved. She had been involved from the moment she walked out that kitchen door and found a girl she didn't know lying unconscious against a wall and made the choice conscious, deliberate, irreversible to stay. She looked at the number on the back of the card. She put it in the pocket of her jacket. She got it up and went to the window and looked out at the street below. And somewhere between the empty sidewalk and the distant sound of the city moving through its own dark hours, Elena understood with the particular clarity of someone who has spent a lifetime knowing when a door is about to open, that her life had just divided itself into before and after, and she had no idea which side of that line was safer. Marco had the name by 4 a.m. He delivered it the way he delivered everything standing in the doorway, hands loose at his sides, voice flat and factual. But his eyes were doing something different. His eyes were telling Dominic that what came next was not going to be simple. Vincent Shade didn't act alone, Marco said. Our man at the port confirmed it. Shade was the hand, but somebody else was the head, somebody higher. Dominic did not move from his chair. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had sat beside his daughter's bed until her breathing settled into something deep and real, and then he had moved to the corridor, and he had waited because waiting was the only thing available to him right now, and Dominic Corsetti was extraordinarily good at waiting. How high, he said. Marco hesitated. That hesitation was its own answer. Say it, Marco. Benedetti. The name sat in the corridor like a physical object, heavy, specific. Dominic looked at the wall across from him and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, Carlo Benedetti. His people sourced the compound. Shade made the approach on the girl at the cafe, but the instruction to use Lily that came from Benedetti directly. Our source heard it firsthand. Carlo Benedetti was not a man you approached with anger. He was not a man you approached at all without preparation, because Carlo Benedetti had been building his position in this city for 31 years, and he had survived 4 attempts on his life in the complete dissolution of 2 rival families. And he was still here, still operating, still smiling his particular smile at dinner tables and charity functions, and the kinds of events where dangerous men wore expensive suits and pretended to be something else. He and Dominic had a working arrangement, had maintained it for 9 years. Territorial respect, shared interests at the port, a mutual understanding that certain lines were never crossed. Carlo Benedetti had just crossed every single one of them. Why, Dominic said. The port contract. Thursday's shipment. It's bigger than we told him. Our source says Benedetti found out the real numbers 2 weeks ago. He thinks you've been cutting him out of something that was supposed to be shared. He thinks wrong. I know that, but he doesn't. Dominic stood up, not fast, deliberately, like someone making a decision with their whole body. Then we need to have a conversation where he gets the opportunity to be corrected. Marco's jaw tightened. Dominic, this is Benedetti. We can't just... I'm not doing anything tonight. He looked at Marco directly. Tonight, I'm going to sit with my daughter and make sure she's safe. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a conversation with Carlo. And if that conversation doesn't go the way it needs to go... He stopped. Then we moved to the next step. Marco nodded. He understood what the next step was. One more thing, Marco said. He pulled out his phone, turned the screen toward Dominic. The girl, Elena Hartwell. I ran her while you were with Lily. Dominic looked at the screen. A photograph driver's license. Elena's face, same direct eyes, same quality of stillness, even in a DMV photo. Age 24, address on the east side. No record, Marco continued. Completely clean. She's been at Sal's diner for 14 months. Before that, she was at a shipping warehouse on the south side. Before that, he paused. Before that, the record gets complicated. She was in foster care until she was 18. 3 different placements. The last one ended badly. There's a police report, but no charges filed. She's been on her own since. Dominic said nothing. He looked at Elena's photograph for a moment longer than necessary. She made a judgment call tonight that protected us, Dominic said finally, and she did it without any guarantee of what she was walking into. You think she can be trusted? I think she has nothing to gain from lying to us and no network to run to if she wanted to. He handed the phone back. I also think she noticed a running car half a block away while she was managing a crisis, and she told me about it without being asked. That's not ordinary. Marco pocketed the phone. What do you want to do with her? Nothing yet. Let her be. Dominic turned back toward Lily's room, but keep an eye on her building tonight, quietly. Already done. Dominic stopped, looked back. You anticipated that. You knelt down in that alley, boss. I've worked with you for 11 years. I've never seen you kneel. Dominic held his gaze for a moment. Then he went back into his daughter's room and closed the door. Lily woke again at 6 a.m. This time her eyes came open faster, clearer, and the first thing she did was look at her father with an expression that was trying very hard to be composed and not quite succeeding. You're still here, she said. Yes. You didn't leave to go handle whatever this turns into. Not yet. She sat up slowly, pressing both hands into the mattress for balance. Her color was better. The doctor had said by morning she would feel close to normal physically. The other kind of normal was going to take longer. I need to tell you something, Lily said. He waited. I was meeting someone at that cafe before everything happened. She looked at her hands. Someone I didn't tell you about, because I knew you'd run a background check on him and then show up at his apartment and Lily. His name is Daniel Park. He's a third-year law student. He is completely ordinary and completely harmless and has nothing to do with any of this. She looked up. I need you to know that before you decide he's connected somehow. He's not. Dominic absorbed this. Where is he now? I texted him from the doctor's phone at 3 a.m., told him I wasn't feeling well and had gone home early. He doesn't know anything. Her jaw tightened, and I would like to keep it that way. If he was with you at the cafe. He left before it happened. We had coffee, he walked me to the door, he went to the library. He texted me at 10:30 asking if I got home safe, and I was already... She stopped, swallowed. I was already here by then, I guess. The reality of what she was describing, the completely ordinary evening that had turned in the space of a single cup of coffee into something that could have killed her, moved through Dominic's chest like a cold current. He had spent years building walls, and someone had walked through them like they were paper. Does Daniel know who you are? He said. Who I am. Lily's eyes went careful. He knows my last name. He's not stupid. He knows what it probably means. And he's still here. He's still here, she said quietly, which is more than I can say for most people. That one landed somewhere specific and they both knew it. Dominic looked at his hands. Lily looked at the wall. The silence between them had the particular texture of something that had been unsaid for a very long time and was now pressing against the surface from the inside. I'm not the person you needed me to be, Edie, Dominic said. He said it the way he said difficult things plainly without decoration, because decoration was a form of cowardice he had never permitted himself. I understood my limitations and I worked around them instead of fixing them. That was a choice, I'm aware of that. Lily stared at him. He had never said anything like this to her before. Not in 19 years. Are you saying that because it's true, she said carefully, or because last night scared you? Both, he said. Both are true at the same time. Her eyes filled. She looked at the ceiling and blinked hard, and he recognized the gesture because it was his gesture. The physical mechanics of not crying that he had passed down to her without meaning to, because children learn even the things you never intend to teach. I'm so angry at you, she said. Her voice was steady, but just barely. I need you to know that. I'm angry about years of things, and last night doesn't erase that. I know. But I also, she stopped, started again. I also heard your voice in that alley, and it was the only thing I could hear, and I kept trying to answer you and I couldn't, and that was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. She looked at him directly, her mother's eyes clear and unsparing. So I don't know what to do with both of those things at the same time. Neither do I, Dominic said. But I'd like to try to figure it out, if you'll let me. The room was very quiet. Then Lily reached across the space between them and touched his hand briefly and pulled back, and that small gesture, that tentative, impermanent, carefully measured contact was more than he had gotten from her in 2 years. Dr. Aguilar discharged Lily at 9 a.m. with instructions and a list of things to watch for in the following 48 hours. Dominic arranged for her to be taken to a different location than her dorm, a private residence on the north side, staff secured, where she would stay until he had finished what needed to be finished. Lily argued about this for exactly 4 minutes. Then she stopped arguing, which was how he knew she was still frightened, because Lily Corsetti, in full health, argued about everything indefinitely. He watched her car pull away. Then he made a call he had been building toward since 4 a.m. Carlo Benedetti answered on the third ring. His voice was warm and unhurried, the voice of a man who had spent decades cultivating the performance of someone with nothing on his conscience. Dominic, it's early. I'm aware we need to meet. A pause, microscopic. Practiced. Of course. I'll have my people call your, today, Carlo, this morning, the restaurant on Clement Street, 11 o'clock. Another pause. Longer this time. That's quite soon. Yes, Dominic said. It is. He hung up. Marco was beside him before he pocketed the phone. He'll come ready. I know. You'll come ready too. I'm always ready. Dominic buttoned his jacket. But I'm not going there to start something. I'm going there to give him one opportunity to tell me the truth. What happens after depends entirely on what he does with that opportunity. Marco said nothing. His expression said everything. It was in the SUV on the way back to change his clothes before the meeting that Dominic's phone rang again. Unknown number. He answered. Silence for a moment. Then a voice he didn't recognize, male, young, nervous. Mr. Corsetti, my name doesn't matter. What matters is that I work for Dr. Lena Vasquez at the University Medical Research Lab. And last night someone accessed our pharmaceutical storage using a key card that belongs to Dr. Vasquez. She doesn't know. She hasn't been told yet. But whoever pulled that compound, they signed in under her name. And if this goes to an investigation, she's the one who takes the fall. Dominic was very still. Why are you calling me? Because I know whose daughter was in that alley. And I know Dr. Vasquez didn't do this. And I am trying to make sure the right person ends up accountable. A breath, shaky. Dr. Vasquez is my mother. The line was quiet. Send me the key card log, Dominic said. Everything. And then don't speak to anyone about this until I tell you it's safe. How do I know you won't just... Because if I wanted Dr. Vasquez blamed for this, I would let the investigation run its course and do nothing. I'm answering your call. That should tell you something. A long silence, then I'll send it in the next hour. The call ended. Dominic looked at Marco. The compound was pulled from a university lab, signed out under a researcher named Vasquez. But it wasn't her. Marco's eyes narrowed. Shade had a contact inside the university. Or Benedetti did. Dominic looked out the window. This is more organized than I thought. This wasn't a pressure move made in haste. Someone planned this. Multiple access points, a clean frame-up for an innocent party, a calibrated dose, a location they knew Lily would be at. He paused. Someone has been watching my daughter for longer than 2 weeks. Marco said a word under his breath that was not suitable for public company. Call our contact at the university security office, Dominic said, quietly. I want to know who else accessed that building in the last 30 days. Done. Marco was already on his phone. Dominic sat back. He thought about Lily at a cafe. An ordinary evening. A cup of coffee, a law student walking her to the door. Everything normal and unremarkable and carefully, deliberately ordinary, because someone had spent weeks making sure she felt safe in that routine so that when the moment came, she wouldn't see it. His phone buzzed. An encrypted message from an unknown sender, the keycard log as promised. He opened it, read it twice. The access time was 11:47 p.m. the previous Tuesday. The keycard was registered to Dr. Lena Vasquez, but the security camera timestamp attached to the log showed a figure in a hood face obscured, height and build matching neither Vasquez nor Shade. A third party, someone he didn't have a name for yet. He forwarded it to Marco without a word. The restaurant on Clement Street was empty when Dominic arrived at 10:58. He had arranged that the owner was an old acquaintance who understood what it meant when Dominic reserved the back room for a private breakfast. No staff inside, no other guests, just the booth, 2 cups of coffee already poured in the particular silence of a room where something important was about to happen. Carlo Benedetti arrived at 11:02, which was deliberate. 4 minutes late was Carlo's signature, a performance of being unhurried, of existing outside the normal rules of time. He came in with 2 men who stopped at the door as they were supposed to. He came to the table with his usual smile in place. He looked at Dominic's face and the smile became slightly less certain. "You look tired, my friend," Carlo said, settling into the booth. "My daughter was drugged last night." Dominic let the sentence sit. He did not help it. He did not soften it or frame it or give Carlo anywhere to go with it except directly into the space it created. Carlo's expression did exactly what Dominic was watching for. A shift, almost invisible, a micro-adjustment of the eyes that lasted less than a second before Carlo reassembled his concern. "My God, she's safe." Dominic picked up his coffee, set it down without drinking. "A waitress found her in an alley and called me. She's recovering." He looked at Carlo steadily. The compound used was pharmaceutical grade, research sourced. The dosage was precise, professional. "That's terrible. Do you have any idea who would—" "Carlo?" The name stopped him. "I'm going to ask you one question," Dominic said, "and I want you to understand that the question is a courtesy. Most men in my position would not offer a courtesy at this point in a conversation like this one. I am offering it because we have 9 years between us, and 9 years deserves at least one question." Carlo's face had gone very still. The performance of warmth was still there technically, but it had been evacuated from the inside. What was left was the face underneath, older, harder, calculating. "What was the question?" Carlo said. "Was it supposed to go further than it did?" Silence. The kind of silence where everything is decided. Carlo set down his own coffee. He looked at the table for a long moment, and then he looked up, and the face he showed Dominic now was not the dinner table face, not the charity function face. It was something closer to honest, which in Carlo Benedetti was both unusual and in its own way deeply alarming. "It was supposed to be a message," Carlo said. "Mowing more. She was never supposed to be hurt." The confirmation spoken plainly without evasion, which meant Carlo had calculated that denial was no longer worth the energy landed in the room like a stone into still water. Dominic said nothing for a long time. "The port contract," Carlo continued, and his voice had lost its warmth entirely, now replaced by something flat and businesslike. "I was told the numbers. I was told my share was significantly less than what you're clearing on Thursday. I was told you restructured the arrangement without informing me." "Who told you?" Carlo's jaw moved. "A source I trusted." "The source was wrong," Dominic said. "The numbers you were given were fabricated. Your share of Thursday's shipment is exactly what we agreed on in March. I have documentation. I will have Marco send it to your office within the hour." Carlo stared at him. "Someone fed you false information," Dominic continued, "knowing exactly how you would respond to it, knowing you would move against me, knowing you would use my daughter to do it." He leaned forward slightly. "You were a mechanism, Carlo. Someone else pulled the trigger and put the gun in your hand." The silence that followed was the longest one yet. Carlo Benedetti, 31 years in this business, sat across from Dominic Corsetti and processed what it felt like to realize he had been used as a weapon against a man he had a 9-year agreement with by someone he still couldn't name. "Who?" Carlo said. The word came out stripped of everything. "Just a question." "I don't have the full answer yet," Dominic said. "But I have a keycard log, a university access record, and a lead that I intend to follow this afternoon." He sat back. I'm telling you this because the person who set this in motion is an enemy of both of us, and because my daughter is safe, and because 9 years is worth one conversation before I decide what comes next. Carlo looked at him. What does come next? That depends on what you're willing to do to correct what happened. Name it. Not yet, Dominic said. First, I find the person who manufactured this situation. Then you and I will talk again. He stood, he buttoned his jacket. He looked down at Carlo with an expression that was perfectly neutral and utterly final. But Carlo, if I find out the message was ever intended to be anything more than a message, if there was a second instruction that was pulled back at the last moment, this conversation will have been the last civil one we have. Carlo held his gaze. It was only ever a message. Then pray that I believe you, Dominic said, and pray that the next conversation goes better than this one deserved to. He walked out. Marco fell into step beside him on the sidewalk. Well, he was used, Dominic said. He doesn't know by whom. He's scared, which means he's useful. He moved toward the car. The third party, whoever was in that university building, that's our real problem. That's who built this whole architecture. Benedetti was the distraction. The person behind him is the one who wanted me looking in the wrong direction. While they did what? Dominic stopped. He thought about the running car, half a block up engine, idling, pulling away 5 minutes before he arrived. He thought about the precision of the dosage enough to incapacitate, not enough to harm. He thought about someone watching Lily's routine for weeks, mapping it, waiting for exactly the right moment. While they got close enough to something I haven't identified yet, he said. His phone buzzed. Marco's buzzed a half second later. They both looked. The message was from the man watching Elena's building on the east side, the quiet surveillance Dominic had requested at 4 a.m. 3 words. She's not here. Dominic looked up from his phone. Something moved behind his eyes, fast, cold, decisive. Elena left her apartment at 7:45 a.m. Marco read from the follow-up message. Alone, on foot. Didn't take the bus. Our man lost her in the market on Arden Street. She wasn't running, Dominic said immediately. She doesn't know she's being watched. Then where is she going at 7:45 in the morning after a night like last night? Dominic thought about a woman who worked doubles most days because she needed the hours, who grew up in a neighborhood where you noticed running cars, who stood in a dark alley with a man like him and asked genuine questions without performing fear. She went to work, he said. Marco stared at him. She went to work. She needed the hours, Dominic said, and he got in the car. Sal's diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease and the particular exhaustion of a place that never fully closed. Elena had been on her feet since 7:50 a.m., 40 minutes into a shift. She had not been scheduled for covering for a coworker named Britt, who had called in sick and whose rent Elena happened to know depended on Britt keeping this job. So Elena had answered the phone at 7:15, still in yesterday's clothes, the blank card still in her jacket pocket, and said yes without thinking about it, because saying yes to things that needed doing was simply how she had been built. She was refilling the corner booth's coffee when the bell above the diner door rang, and she looked up and every nerve in her body registered the shift before her brain caught up with it. Dominic Corsetti walked into Sal's diner at 10:47 in the morning in a suit that cost more than 3 months of her rent, and the way he moved through the door, unhurried, precise, like a man who had decided something and was now executing, it made her hand go very still on the coffee pot. The 2 men behind him stopped at the entrance. He came to the counter alone. He sat down on a stool. He looked at her. He said nothing. Elena set the coffee pot down on the warmer. She pulled out her order pad. She said with complete composure that she was enormously proud of, "What can I get you coffee?" Dominic said. "Black." She poured it. She slid the cup across the counter. She did not ask how his daughter was because this was not a conversation she was going to start. Whatever he had come here to say, she was going to let him say it. He wrapped both hands around the cup. He looked at it, then he looked at her. "You went to work," he said. "I'm covering someone's shift." "After everything that happened last night, you covered someone's shift." She needed the coverage. Elena leaned against the counter behind her arms crossed, keeping the distance professional. "Your daughter, is she okay?" Something moved through his expression, brief, almost imperceptible. "She's recovering. She'll be fine." He paused. "Physically." Elena nodded. She understood the distinction without needing it explained. I'm going to ask you something, Dominic said, and I need a direct answer. That's generally how questions work. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. After you went back inside last night, did anyone come to the diner? Ask you about what you saw? Call you? She thought about it honestly. No, I finished my shift. Sal asked why I'd been outside so long, and I told him I thought I heard something in the alley and checked, but it was nothing. He complained about the cold coming in through the door and went back to the register. She paused. No one called. No one came. Good. He drank his coffee, set the cup down. I need you to continue saying nothing. To everyone. I already told you I would. I know what you told me. I'm telling you it's more important now than it was last night. His eyes were steady on hers. Not threatening, she was certain of that, and she trusted her instincts on that kind of thing more than most people trusted hard evidence. He was not threatening her. He was warning her. There was a difference and it mattered. What happened to my daughter was not random. There are people involved who may at some point want to know if there were any witnesses. Elena felt the specific coldness of that sentence move through her. Not panic she had learned a long time ago, that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford, but a clear, clean awareness of where she was standing and what the ground beneath her feet actually consisted of. Are you telling me I'm in danger? She said. I'm telling you it's possible. I'm also telling you that I have people watching your building, and they will continue doing so until this is resolved. She stared at him. You already have people watching my building. Since 4 a.m. Without asking me. Would you have said yes? She opened her mouth, closed it. The honest answer was complicated. That's not the point. The point, Dominic said, is that you made a choice last night that put you adjacent to something you didn't know the full shape of. I'm trying to make sure that choice doesn't cost you anything. He held her gaze. You can tell me to pull them back. I'll respect that. Elena looked at him for a long moment. The diner noise moved around them, plates, conversation, the cook shouting something at the dishwasher, and in the middle of all of it, she was having an extremely unusual conversation with an extremely unusual man who had just told her with complete straightforwardness that he was protecting her without her permission and was offering to stop if she asked. Leave them, she said. He nodded once. But I want to know if something changes, she added. If the situation shifts and I need to actually worry, I want to know. I don't do well with being managed. I noticed, he said, and that time it was closer to a real expression. Brief but real. He reached into his jacket. He placed an envelope on the counter. Elena looked at it without touching it. That's not necessary, she said. It's not a payment. It's an apology. He pushed it half an inch closer. You missed the end of your shift last night. You're covering someone else's shift this morning. The amount inside represents 6 weeks of doubles at your current rate. She stared at the envelope. Her jaw tightened. The particular pride of someone who had been taking care of herself since 18 rose up in her chest, hot and immediate. I didn't help her for money, Elena said. I know that. His voice was even. That's precisely why I want you to take it. People who do the right thing without expectation of reward are exactly the people who deserve to have something unexpected go right for them. He stood, left a 50 on the counter for the coffee. Take the envelope, Elena. It doesn't obligate you to anything. He walked to the door. His men fell in behind him. She watched his hand push the door open. Mr. Corsetti? He stopped. The car that was running on 5th Street last night, the dark blue one, before it pulled away, the driver's window was down for about 30 seconds. I didn't mention it last night because it didn't seem relevant then. But there was someone in the passenger seat, not the driver. The passenger. She kept her voice level. He was looking at the alley, not driving past, parked and looking. Then the window went up and they left. Dominic turned around slowly. His full attention was on her face. You saw the passenger, he said. I saw his profile. He was older, gray at the temples. She paused, reaching for it accurately. He had a very particular way of sitting, very straight, like someone who'd been told their whole life to sit up straight and it became permanent. The quality of Dominic's stillness changed. Something she couldn't name moved through him, recognition, or something close to it. Would you recognize him if you saw him again? He said. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket again and placed a second card on the counter next to the envelope, this one with a name printed on it, Marco Vitale, a number underneath. Call that number tonight, Dominic said. Marco will come to you. He'll have photographs. Tell him what you told me and tell him which one, if any, matches what you saw. He paused. Can you do that? Elena picked up the card. Yes. Don't call from your regular phone. There's a prepaid in the envelope. He looked at her steadily. You've already done more than you needed to. I want you to know that I'm aware of that. Then he left. The bell above the door rang once and he was gone. Lena stood at the counter for a moment. She picked up the envelope. She put it in her apron pocket and went to refill the corner booth's coffee and did not think about it again until her break, when she sat in the back hallway and opened it and found the prepaid phone and more money in cash than she had seen in one place since the year she turned 18, and understood with great clarity that the world was not structured in her favor. She put the money back in the envelope. She put the envelope in her bag. She went back to work. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the man in the passenger seat of the dark blue car, the older man with gray temples and a lifetime of perfect posture, had been watching the alley that night, not because of Lily Corsetti, but because of Elena herself. Had been watching her specifically. Had been watching her for 4 days. His name was Richard Hale, and he was about to become the most important person in Elena Hartwell's life, for reasons that had nothing to do with Dominic Corsetti and everything to do with a past Elena had spent 6 years trying to outrun. Dominic learned the name Richard Hale at 1:15 p.m. when the university security contact Marco had reached out to sent through the full access log for the research building. The keycard entry under Vasquez's name had been the visible event, but 40 minutes earlier, a different credential had accessed the building's administrative floor, a visitor badge issued 3 weeks prior for a scheduled facility tour. The name on the badge was a shell, a company that existed on paper and nowhere else. But the contact number attached to the badge registration traced through 2 intermediaries that Marco's people unraveled in under 2 hours to a private consulting firm on the west side. Richard Hale Principal, 30 years in private intelligence and corporate security. Former government, the specific former government agency was listed in the documents with a set of initials that made Marco go very quiet when he read them. This is not a mafia problem, Marco said. He and Dominic were in the back of the SUV, documents spread between them, the city moving past the windows at a speed that matched neither of their internal states. This is not Benedetti's world. This man is... I know what he is, Dominic said. Then you know we don't have the tools to... We have the tools we need. Dominic looked at the photograph in the file Marco had assembled. Richard Hale, mid-60s, gray at the temples, the kind of face that had seen a great deal and given very little of it away over a long time. What I don't have yet is the reason. Why does a man like this want anything from my world? What does he get from manufacturing a conflict between me and Benedetti? Marco spread his hands. Distraction. While you're looking at Benedetti, while Benedetti is scrambling to manage you, neither of you is looking at whatever Hale is actually doing, which is unknown, but it's at that port. Everything points back to Thursday's shipment. Dominic looked out the window. Thursday was 36 hours away. The shipment was the largest single movement of materials his operation had managed in 3 years, the culmination of a deal that had taken 14 months to structure, involving parties on 4 continents, and a chain of transactions that was both legally impeccable on its surface and entirely something else underneath. If someone with Hale's background wanted to interfere with it, they had options Dominic could not fully anticipate. And if Hale had been willing to use Lily as a distraction mechanism, he was either desperate or he was confident enough in his own insulation that consequences didn't concern him. Neither option was comfortable. I need to know what he wants, Dominic said. Before Thursday, not what he's doing, what he wants. Those are different questions. How do we get that? Dominic thought about a woman sitting in a back hallway of a diner with an envelope of cash and a prepaid phone. He thought about a profile seen through a car window, an older man's straight posture looking at an alley with focused, specific attention. He thought about the fact that Richard Hale had been parked on 5th Street last night. Not near the cafe where Lily had been drugged, not near the clinic, but at the diner. At Elena's diner. Pull everything on Elena Hartwell, Dominic said. Not the surface. Marco already ran everything. Her foster placements, the police report from the last placement, every address she's lived at since 18, everyone she's had consistent contact with. Marco looked at him carefully. You think she's connected to Hale? I think Hale was parked outside her workplace at 11 p.m. and watching the alley while she was in it. I think that's not a coincidence. I think Elena Hartwell has no idea who Richard Hale is and no idea that he has any interest in her. And that combination of circumstances is exactly the kind of thing that gets innocent people hurt. Marco picked up his phone. Quickly, Dominic said, and gently. He called Lily. She answered after 2 rings, her voice still slightly rough at the edges, but sharper than this morning. The sedative's hold was releasing. Are you settled? He asked. I'm fine. The house is nice. The security people are very polite. A pause. One of them made me a grilled cheese, which I did not ask for, but was actually amazing. Something in his chest eased slightly. Good. Dad, her voice changed. You found something. I can hear it. I found several things. None of them are resolved yet. Is it worse than you thought? He considered lying. Briefly, genuinely considered it. Yes, he said. But manageable. Everything is manageable. That's what you always say. Because it's always been true. A short silence. Tell me one thing. Just one honest thing about what's happening. He thought about it. Someone with significant resources used Benedetti to come at me, knowing Benedetti would use you to do it. The person behind it isn't from my world. They're from a different world, government adjacent, professional, and they wanted me distracted from something happening on Thursday. Lily was quiet for a moment. So I was bait. Yes, for something that has nothing to do with me. Nothing at all. Another silence. The waitress, Elena, does she have anything to do with this? The question surprised him. He paused. Why do you ask that? I don't know. I keep thinking about her. Lily's voice was careful, feeling its way through something. You said she stayed with me for almost 20 minutes in an alley, at night, alone. A pause. Dead people don't do that. Not strangers, not without a reason. Her reason was that you needed help, and she was there, Dominic said. Some people are built that way. Maybe, Lily said quietly, or maybe there's something else. He sat with that for a moment after they hung up. His daughter, 19 years old, 24 hours out from being drugged unconscious, was lying in a secured house eating a grilled cheese and thinking more clearly than most of his lieutenants did on their best days. He had underestimated her. He had been underestimating her for years, he realized, calibrating her to the child she had been instead of the person she had become. Marco came back to him at 3 p.m. with a folder. He set it on the seat between them and didn't say anything for a moment, which was how Dominic knew it was significant. Elena Hartwell, Marco said, born 24 years ago at St. Catherine's Hospital. Mother deceased drug-related. Elena was 4 years old. Father unknown on the birth certificate. 3 foster placements between ages 4 and 18. The last placement, he stopped. The family name was Hale. The car was completely silent. Richard Hale had a brother, Marco continued, his voice carefully even. Younger, Dennis Hale. Dennis and his wife fostered 3 children over 6 years. Elena was the third. She was placed with them at 15. She filed a complaint against Dennis Hale at 17. The police report cites emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and the deliberate isolation of a minor. No charges were filed. The case was closed. Elena aged out of the system at 18, and the record was sealed. Dominic looked at the folder. He did not touch it. Richard Hale, he said. Elena's last foster family was Richard Hale's brother. Dennis Hale died 8 months ago, heart failure. He left an estate not enormous but not nothing. The will was contested by his wife and by a third party. Marco looked at him. Elena Hartwell is the third party. It appears that Dennis Hale had an insurance policy separate from the estate that was designated years ago before the complaint was filed to Elena specifically. The wife is contesting it. The legal case has been ongoing for 7 months. How much? Dominic said. $240,000. The number sat there. For a woman working doubles at a diner because she needed the hours, $240,000 was not a number. It was a life, an entirely different version of a life. Richard Hale is the wife's representative in the contest, Marco said. He's been managing the legal strategy, which means he has full access to Elena's legal filings, her address history, her financial records, everything submitted through the contested estate process. He knows everything about her, Dominic said. Everything. And she knows nothing about him? She's been fighting this case through a legal aid attorney who I'll note has lost 2 procedural motions in the last 4 months. She's losing Dominic. Slowly and certainly she's losing. Dominic thought about the envelope of creatine he had left at the diner counter. He thought about Elena pushing it half an inch closer like it was going to move itself. He thought about, "I didn't help her for money," said with the particular flatness of someone who has had to defend their motivations before and was tired of it. He thought about a 19-year-old girl lying in an alley saying "dad" to the empty air, and a 24-year-old woman who had stayed beside her for 19 minutes with no obligation to do so and every reason to simply walk away. "She stayed with Lily," Dominic said slowly, "in that alley for 19 minutes in the cold and the dark alone. Not because she knew who Lily was, not because she expected anything in return." He paused. "And the man who has spent 8 months systematically stripping away the only financial security she's ever been offered was sitting in a car half a block away, watching her while she did it." Marco said nothing. "Richard Hale was not there because of my daughter," Dominic said. "He was there because of Elena. He was watching her. He may have followed her. He may have been watching her for days, learning her routine, understanding her movements." He looked at Marco. Why does a man of his background care enough about a contested insurance policy to personally surveil the person contesting it? "The policy," Marco said carefully. "We looked at what Dennis Hale did professionally before he retired." He opened the folder to the last page. "He was a contractor, government adjacent, same world as his brother, and the insurance policy Elena is entitled to." He tapped the page. "It was issued through a private firm that also appears in the documentation trail for Thursday's shipment. 3 layers removed. But it's there." The silence that followed was absolute. "The money in that policy," Dominic said. "It's not insurance money." "No, Den. It's documentation. It's a thread." He leaned forward. "Dennis Hale knew something. Something about Thursday's shipment, about Richard Hale, about something that runs through both of them. And he put Elena's name on that policy because she was the one person Richard Hale would never expect to be a threat," Marco said. "A 24-year-old waitress with a sealed juvenile record and a legal aid attorney. Nobody looks twice at her." Dominic sat back. He pressed both hands flat on his thighs and looked at the ceiling of the car and breathed once slowly through his nose. Elena Hartwell had walked out a diner kitchen door to take out the trash and stumbled into something that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with her simultaneously. She had stayed beside his daughter out of nothing but decency. She had stood in the cold and given him information and taken his card and gone home and gone to sleep and gotten up in the morning and gone back to work because someone needed the coverage. And she was walking around the city right now with a target on her back that she had no idea existed, carrying a prepaid phone and an envelope of cash, thinking the most dangerous thing in her life was a contested insurance policy and a legal aid attorney who kept losing motions. "Where is she right now?" Dominic said. Marco checked his phone. "Still at the diner. Shift ends at 4. I need her somewhere safe before tonight." He paused. "And I need her to understand why without terrifying her so badly she runs. How are you planning to manage that?" Dominic looked at the folder. He thought about what Elena had said at the counter, "I don't do well with being managed." He thought about the direct, unblinking steadiness of someone who had been taking care of herself since the age of 18 through sheer undecorated determination. "Honestly," he said, "the same way she handled everything else. Directly and without performance." His phone buzzed. He looked down. It was a message from the man watching Sal's diner, the quiet surveillance that had been in place since this morning. 4 words. "Someone else is watching." And then 3 seconds later, a photograph taken from across the street, angled grainy, but clear enough. A figure on the opposite sidewalk. Older, gray at the temples, the very straight posture of someone who had been told their whole life to sit up and it had become permanent. Richard Hale, standing on the sidewalk across from Sal's diner, in the middle of the afternoon, not hiding, not rushing, just standing there with the patient, unhurried quality of a man who was very good at waiting for exactly the right moment. Dominic looked at the photograph for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said to Marco very quietly, "Get me to that diner. Now, do not call Elena. Do not alarm anyone inside. Just get me there." The car was already moving before he finished the sentence. The SUV covered 6 blocks in 4 minutes. Dominic was out before Marco fully stopped moving through the diner's front door, with the particular controlled speed of a man who had learned that running announced panic, and panic cost you everything. The bell rang. Elena was behind the counter. She looked up and her face did the thing it always did, registered his presence, assessed. It did not perform a reaction. But her eyes went immediately to the window facing the street because she had already noticed something. He could see it in the set of her shoulders. "Back," Dominic said quietly. "Now, through the kitchen." "My shift doesn't, Elena." He held her gaze. One word. Everything in it. She read him the way she had read him in the alley, quickly, accurately, without needing the full explanation. She pulled off her apron. She said something to the cook through the window. She came around the counter and walked ahead of him without being told which direction. In the kitchen, Dominic took a position where he could see through the service window to the street. Richard Hale had not moved. He was still there, still patient, still watching the front of the diner with the focused calm of a man who believed he controlled the timeline. "Who is he?" Elena said. She was standing beside Dominic, looking through the same window. She had picked out Hale immediately, which confirmed everything. "You've seen him before," Dominic said. "3 times in the last 4 days. I thought he was just, I don't know, a man waiting for someone or walking by." She paused. "He's not walking by." "No, who is he?" she said again, and this time the question had an edge in it. Not fear, not yet, but the specific tension of someone who has just realized that something they dismissed as coincidence was never coincidence at all. Dominic looked at her. He made a decision in under 2 seconds, which was how he made most decisions, quickly with full commitment, because hesitation in his experience cost more than being wrong. "His name is Richard Hale," he said. "He's a private intelligence consultant, former government. He has been managing the legal opposition to your insurance claim against the estate of Dennis Hale." He paused. Dennis Hale was his brother. The kitchen was very loud, exhaust fans, the cook shouting at the dishwasher, pans hitting the range. In the middle of all of it, Elena went completely still. "You know about the case," she said. "I know about the case. How long have you known?" 3 hours. She looked at him with an expression that was working through several things at once. "You ran me. When your daughter was still at the clinic, you had someone run my background." "Yes." "And you found the Hale connection." "Yes." She turned back to the window. Hale was still there. "He has no reason to watch me personally. His lawyers file motions. I respond through my attorney. That's how this works." Her voice was even processing out loud. "Unless there's something in the case that he's worried about that has nothing to do with the money." She was fast. Dominic had already known that, but the speed with which she arrived at the correct conclusion without the full information, without the documentation trail Marco had spent 2 hours unraveling, was something else. "The policy isn't just an insurance payout," he said. She turned to look at him. Dennis Hale was involved in something larger than his private life. The firm that issued the policy is connected through several layers to activity at the port, to Thursday's shipment, to the same operation that Richard Hale has been working against from the outside. He held her gaze. "We believe Dennis designated you as beneficiary not to give you money, but to give you documentation. When you file your final claim and when certain records transfer. Records that Richard Hale does not want transferred to anyone." The silence that followed was the longest she'd given him. "Dennis Hale destroyed my life for 3 years, Elena said. Her voice was completely flat. "He took the money the state gave for my care and used it for his own expenses. He told me every day that I was temporary, that no one was going to keep me, that I was a transaction, not a person. He filed paperwork saying I had behavioral problems, so he could justify the control." She stopped. One breath, controlled. "And now you're telling me he left me something real, something that mattered." "I'm telling you, he may have spent the last years of his life trying to correct something," Dominic said. "I don't know his reasons. I know the facts." "People don't get to do that," she said. "They don't get to hurt you for years and then leave you something in a will and call it even." "No," Dominic said. They don't. Another silence. Then what does Richard Hale want from me? To make sure you never win that case, to make sure those records never transfer. And, he paused. Possibly more than that. He's been watching you for 4 days. That's not just legal strategy. That's something else. Wow. The cook shouted something. Neither of them moved. I need to get you out of here, Dominic said. Somewhere safe until I understand the full shape of this. I have a secured residence. My daughter is already there. He watched her face carefully. You can say no. You are not obligated to me for anything. But I want you to understand clearly what you're saying no to. Elena looked through the service window one more time. Richard Hale had finally moved, not leaving repositioning, angling himself toward the diner's side entrance. A man adjusting his approach. He's coming in, she said. I know. She looked at Dominic. If I leave with you right now, what happens to this situation, Sam? It becomes mine to manage. And if I stay, then you handle a 63-year-old intelligence professional, loaded with no information and no backup in your workplace. He held her gaze. You're good, Elena. You are genuinely remarkably good at handling things. But not this one. Not alone. The side door handle moved. Let's go, Elena said. They went out the back before the side door fully opened. Marco had the car at the alley exit. They were inside and moving before Richard Hale completed his turn through the side entrance and found the counter empty and the cook shrugging at him from behind the window. No one spoke in the car for the first 2 minutes. Marco drove. Dominic sat with his phone working through messages. Elena sat on the far side of the back seat with her bag on her lap and her hands folded over it and looked out the window with the particular composure of someone choosing deliberately and actively not to fall apart. I have a question, she said finally. Ask it. Why does any of this involve you? Your daughter was the one who got hurt. The port, the shipment, Hale, that's your world. But the insurance case, Dennis Hale, the records, that has nothing to do with you. You could walk away from my part of this and focus on Thursday. Dominic looked at her. You stayed with my daughter for 19 minutes. That's not an answer. It's the only answer. He held her gaze. My daughter is 19 years old. She's been in and out of my security net since she was 12. She has 2 full-time protective details she spent years trying to lose because she wants a normal life. And I have never once blamed her for that because she's right. It is not normal and she deserves better. He paused. You kept her safe when my entire apparatus failed to. You made a choice that no one asked you to make and that cost you something. That matters to me. It matters absolutely. Elena was quiet for a moment. It didn't cost me anything. It cost you your peace of mind. It cost you sleep. And it may cost you significantly more before this is finished, which is why I'm sitting here instead of focusing only on Thursday. She looked out the window. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. Less explaining, more telling. She glanced at him. You actually explain things to people. When they deserve the explanation, he said, which is less often than you'd think in my world. Marco turned the car north and they rode in a silence that was for the first time in 36 hours something close to companionable. The secured residence was a townhouse, 4 stories, staff at the entrance, nothing that announced itself from the outside. Lily was in the second-floor sitting room when they arrived. She stood up when she heard the door. She looked past her father and found Elena standing in the hallway, still in her diner uniform bag over one shoulder, and Lily Corsetti crossed the room in 6 strides and said, You're the one who found me, not as a question, but as a statement of something she had been waiting to confirm for 17 hours. Yes, Elena said, I want to say thank you. Lily's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I know thank you isn't the right size for what you did, but I don't have a better word yet. Elena looked at her. Something moved in her face, something she didn't move fast enough to put away. You don't have to thank me, I just stayed, that's all I did. You just stayed, Lily repeated. Do you know how rare that is? The two of them stood in the hallway looking at each other, and Dominic watched from 3 feet away as something passed between them. Wordless, immediate, the particular recognition of 2 people who have both spent significant portions of their lives learning not to rely on anyone staying. You should eat something, Lily said. The kitchen here is actually really good. Someone made me a grilled cheese at 9 a.m., and it was honestly the best thing I've had in weeks. Elena almost smiled. It was the closest thing to a full smile Dominic had seen from her. I haven't eaten since last night, she admitted. Come on, Lily said and turned toward the kitchen like the matter was decided, and Elena followed her, and just like that, the two of them disappeared around the corner together, as though they had known each other for years instead of 17 hours, in a story that neither of them had fully been told yet. Marco appeared at Dominic's shoulder. Teeth called. Our contact at the port. Someone tried to access the Thursday manifest remotely at 2 p.m. unauthorized, flagged by the system, but not traced before they pulled back. They knew exactly which files to look for. Hale, Dominic said. Has to be. He's mapping the full operation. He doesn't have what he needs yet, but he's building toward it. How much time do we have? If he moves on Thursday, directly 30 hours. If he goes through the legal route to block the insurance transfer. Marco looked uncomfortable. Elena's attorney received a new filing this afternoon. An emergency injunction to freeze all estate proceedings pending a criminal investigation into her background. Dominic went very still. They're going to manufacture a criminal record for her. They don't have to manufacture much. Her sealed juvenile file, if someone with Hale's clearances petitions to unseal it based on a criminal investigation, it opens. And whatever's in there, true or not, becomes public record. Marco paused. Her legal aid attorney called her cell twice while she was at the diner. She hasn't checked her phone yet. Dominic thought about Elena in the kitchen with his daughter eating a grilled cheese, not yet knowing that the last wall she had between herself and complete legal annihilation had just been actively targeted. Get me the best estate attorney in this city, Dominic said. Not good, the best. I want them briefed and on the phone within the hour. That's going to cost. I know what it costs. Do it. Marco moved away. Dominic walked to the kitchen doorway and stopped there. Elena was sitting at the counter, both hands around a cup of tea, listening to Lily talk with the focused, genuine attention of someone who was actually listening instead of waiting for their turn to speak. Lily was telling her something. Dominic caught the words university and library, and Daniel and Elena was asking questions that made Lily lean forward slightly, the way people lean toward warmth. He watched them for a moment. His daughter, who had stopped opening up to him 2 years ago, was talking freely to a woman she had met 17 hours ago under the worst possible circumstances. And Elena, who had shown him nothing but competence and guardedness in the particular self-sufficiency of someone who had learned to need very little from anyone, was softening around the edges in a way that was not performance and was not strategic. It was the most human thing he had seen in this house in a very long time. He cleared his throat. Elena looked up. Lily looked up. Elena, he said, there's something you need to know. She set down the tea. Tell me. He came into the kitchen. He sat down across from her, not at the head of the table, not at an angle of authority, but directly across level, the way he sat when the conversation required honesty from both sides. Richard Hale filed an emergency injunction this afternoon to freeze your estate proceedings. He's citing a pending criminal investigation. The color in Elena's face shifted. Not dramatically, she held herself together, but it shifted. There's no criminal investigation. Not yet, but a man with his connections and his motivations can generate the paperwork for one faster than your attorney can respond. He held her gaze. He's going to try to unseal your juvenile file. Use whatever's in it to discredit your claim and shut down the transfer. Elena looked at the table. Her jaw was doing something working holding. There's nothing in that file that I did, she said quietly. Everything in it was, she stopped. Dennis Hale filed reports on me, repeatedly. Things I hadn't done, behavioral issues I didn't have. It was a control mechanism. I tried to fight it at the time and I couldn't, so I stopped and just waited until I was 18 and I left. She looked up. He was building a file on me in case I ever told anyone what was happening in that house. Insurance, so that anything I said would be discredited. He built a file, Dominic said, and now his brother is going to use it. Lily, who had gone very quiet during this exchange, said, that's what he's been doing for 8 months, just systematically destroying her ability to fight back. Yes, Dominic said. Lily looked at Elena. Her expression was the particular fury of someone young enough to still be genuinely outraged by injustice, not yet worn down to resignation. We're not letting that happen, she said. Lily, no. She turned to her father. We're not letting that happen. You know we're not. Tell me you've already called someone. I called someone 6 minutes ago, he said. Lily looked back at Elena. He called someone 6 minutes ago. It's handled. Elena looked at Dominic. You can't just... The attorney's name is Catherine Voss, Dominic said. She has never lost an estate case. She has had 3 emergency injunctions overturned in the last 2 years. She will be briefed within the hour and she will file a counter motion by morning. He held Elena's gaze. This does not make us even. This is not a transaction. Your situation exists because of events set in motion by people connected to my world, and I am going to correct it to the extent I can. That's all. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, What do you need from me? Your complete trust for the next 30 hours. And a conversation tonight with Marco about the photographs, about Richard Hale's profile, about everything you remember from those 4 days you saw him. He paused. And I need you to tell me something honestly. What? The sealed juvenile file? Is there anything in it, anything at all, that's true that Hale could use legitimately? She met his eyes without flinching. I was 17 years old and I ran away from that house twice. They brought me back both times. Those are the only real entries. Her voice was completely level. Everything else Dennis Hale put in that file is a lie he told to protect himself. Dominic nodded once. Then we're fine. His phone rang. Marco. He stood and answered it, and the answer on the other end restructured everything again. We found the third party, Marco said. The person who was in that university building. The figure on the security camera. A pause. It's not someone in Hale's organization. It's someone in ours. Dominic walked out of the kitchen. He lowered his voice. Say that again. The build, the gate, the timing, our analyst matched it. The person who accessed the pharmaceutical lab and pulled the compound that was used on Lily, they have a key card from a university that was issued 3 years ago to a consultant who worked briefly with our operation. Marco's voice was carefully controlled. The name on the consultant contract is a shell, same as the visitor badge. But the physical profile and the movement pattern match someone our analyst has flagged before. He works for Vincent Shade. Shade sourced the compound himself, Dominic said. He didn't go through Hale's people. Which means Shade and Hale are not the same operation. They're parallel operations. Both targeting Thursday, both using Lily as leverage, but independently neither one knows the other is in play. The implications of that unfolded in Dominic's mind with cold, crystalline clarity. 2 separate organizations, 2 separate agendas converging on the same point without coordination, which meant neither one had the full picture, which meant there was a gap between them, a gap that someone with the right information and the right timing could step into. Where is Shade? Dominic said. That's the other thing. Marco's voice dropped. He's gone. As of this morning, his apartment, his office, his usual locations, nothing. He moved himself sometime between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. Before I met with Benedetti. Yes. He knew I was going to surface the connection. Someone warned him. Dominic turned it over. Or he was watching the situation and read what was coming. He moved to the window. 2 operations targeting Thursday, one through the port directly, one through Elena's records, the documentation transfer. They're hitting from both sides and they don't know they're both doing it. And somewhere in the middle, Marco said, is the thing that Thursday's shipment is actually carrying that makes all of this worth it to 2 separate organizations and a retired intelligence professional. Dominic looked back toward the kitchen. Through the wall, he could hear Lily's voice and then Elena's lower, steadier something that might have been a short, quiet laugh. The original deal documentation for Thursday's shipment, Dominic said. Where is the master copy? In the safe at your office. Move it, tonight, somewhere neither Shade nor Hale have any thread connecting to. He thought for a moment. And get me the full shipment manifest. Every item. I want to look at it myself. You think there's something in the cargo you don't know about. I think 2 organizations have decided Thursday is worth burning down every existing arrangement in this city. That does not happen for the numbers I was shown 14 months ago. He paused. Someone added something. Along the chain, at some point between the original agreement and Thursday. That would mean someone inside the operation. Yes, Dominic said. It would. He ended the call. He stood in the hallway for a moment, his hand still on the phone, and he performed the particular internal reorganization that his life had required of him, over and over, taking a situation that had expanded beyond its original shape, reassessing it without the luxury of time, identifying the new center of gravity and moving toward it. The center of gravity was Thursday. Everything else, Benedetti shade Hale, the legal maneuvers against Elena, the university lab, the running car on Fifth Street, was architecture built around that single point. He went back to the kitchen. Elena looked at his face. She read it the way she read everything. Something changed, she said. Several things, he said. None of them change what I need from you tonight, but they change the size of what we're dealing with. How much bigger, she said. He sat back down. He looked at her across the table. The situation with Hale is not just about your insurance claim. The records that transfer when you win that case, they're not just documentation of what Dennis Hale was involved in. They're evidence of something connected to a much larger operation, something that multiple parties are willing to go to significant lengths to prevent from becoming visible. Elena was very still. Dennis was involved in something that big. Not knowingly, perhaps, or perhaps knowingly and with regret. We don't have that answer. He held her gaze. What I know is that whatever he left you, he left deliberately. He knew what it was. He knew what it would do if it reached the right person. And he put your name on it. She was quiet for a long moment, then very softly, he owed me. Yes, Dominic said. He did. He spent 3 years making me feel like nothing, like a number in a system, like someone that the world processed and filed and forgot. She looked at her hands. And then he died and left me the one thing that could burn the whole system down. She looked up. That's not an apology. That's just one terrible man trying to make one terrible thing he knew about slightly less terrible on his way out the door. Probably, Dominic said, but it may be enough. Lily had been quiet through this. Now she said carefully, is Elena in danger tonight? Real danger. Dominic looked at his daughter. She was watching him with her mother's clear, unsparing eyes, and he had promised himself in that clinic hallway that he would not manage her anymore, would not calibrate what she was told to protect her from the weight of it. Yes, he said, but not here, not in this building tonight. He looked at them both. Tomorrow is when things move. Elena looked at Lily. Lily looked at Elena. Some unspoken calculation happened between them in about 2 seconds. The rapid, wordless negotiation of two people who have both learned to assess risk and act independently. Then we eat something real, Lily said, standing up. And you tell me everything about this Hale person, everything, because if I'm going to be in a secured house while my father dismantles 2 organizations simultaneously, I want to actually understand what's happening. Elena looked at Dominic. Something in her expression was asking him the same question more formally. Yes, he said to both of them. You deserve to understand what's happening. And so at 7:15 p.m. in the kitchen of a secured townhouse on the north side of the city, Dominic Corsetti sat across from his daughter and a waitress he had met less than 20 hours ago and told them the truth. All of it, or as much of it as he understood. And in the doing of it, something shifted in the room that had nothing to do with operations or shipments or intelligence professionals. Something human and small and improbably important. It was still shifting when Marco knocked and entered at 8:30 with a single piece of paper in his hand and an expression that meant everything was about to change again. He placed it on the table. Dominic looked at it. It was the full Thursday manifest pulled from the safe. Every line of cargo, every item, every designation. And at the bottom, added in a handwriting that was not his and not Marco's, and not anyone he had ever authorized to touch this document, 6 words in small, clean letters that made the whole architecture of the last 36 hours reorganize itself one final time. She already has what you need. Dominic read the 6 words 3 times, not because he didn't understand them, because understanding them completely required a moment he didn't normally permit himself, the moment of accepting that the ground beneath him was not the ground he thought he was standing on. She already has what you need. Marco stood at the edge of the table and said nothing. He had the particular stillness of a man who understood that he was in the presence of something larger than the current situation and was waiting to be told what it meant. Lily looked at the paper. She looked at her father. She had never seen his face do what it was doing right now, not afraid, not confused, but recalibrating. The precise internal movement of a mind absorbing a complete restructuring of everything it thought it knew. Elena looked at the paper last. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "May I see it?" Dominic slid it across the table. She read the 6 words. She set the paper down. She reached into her bag, the one she had carried out of the diner 3 hours ago, the one she had not let go of since, and she placed it on the table between them. "Dennis Hale gave me something," she said, "7 months ago, before he died. I thought it was just an apology, a gesture. He sent it through the legal process as part of the estate disclosure. My attorney received it and forwarded it to me, and I looked at it and didn't understand what I was looking at, and I put it away because I was angry and I didn't want anything from him." She looked at Dominic. "I've been carrying it for 7 months because I didn't know what else to do with it." She reached into the bag. She produced an envelope standard-sized cream-colored, sealed with tape that had already been opened and resealed once the edges worn from months of being carried. She set it on the table beside the manifest. "I didn't know it was important," she said. "I genuinely did not know." Dominic opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single folded document, 2 pages dense with data. Serial numbers, transaction codes, dates running back 4 years. Names that meant nothing to Elena and everything to Dominic because 3 of those names appeared on the Thursday manifest in the shipment's chain of custody documentation. And the transaction codes cross-referenced with the port records Marco had been building for 2 hours, mapped directly onto a layer of the operation that Dominic had been told 14 months ago did not exist. The shipment was not carrying what he had been told it was carrying, had never been carrying it. The entire 14-month deal had been constructed around a cargo that was on its surface completely legitimate and underneath in a layer of documentation that had been added incrementally over the course of a year. Something else entirely. Something that connected Richard Hale's former government work, Vincent Shade's private operation, and a chain of transactions that Dennis Hale had quietly recorded and then hidden in the estate of a 24-year-old woman he had wronged because she was the last person anyone would look at. Dominic set the document down. He looked at Elena. "You've been walking around for 7 months with the evidence that 2 separate organizations have been trying to suppress," he said. "In your bag, at the diner. On the bus." "I didn't know what it was," she said again. Her voice was steady, but something underneath it was not. "I know." He held her gaze. "Elena, I need you to understand something. This document, what's in this envelope, is the reason Richard Hale has been watching you. Not the insurance case, not the money. He needed to know whether you had opened it, whether you had understood it, whether you had shown it to anyone." He paused. "The insurance case was just the mechanism. The real target was always this." The kitchen was very quiet. "Dennis told him," Elena said slowly, "before he died. He told Richard that he had given me something. Or Richard found out another way. But yes, he knew." Dominic looked at the document again. "And he has spent 8 months trying to discredit you completely, your background, your juvenile file, your legal standing, so that if this ever surfaced, anything you said about it would be inadmissible, unreliable. The word of a woman with a sealed criminal record against the word of a 63-year-old former government official." Lily made a sound, short, sharp, furious. "That is systematic," Dominic said. "It's systematic, and it's professional, and it very nearly worked." He looked at Marco. "Get Catherine Voss on the phone, now, and get me a secure line into our contact at the federal oversight office, not the local office, the federal level." Marco was already moving. Elena looked at the document on the table. Something was moving through her face. Not relief, not yet too many pieces still in motion for relief. Something more complicated, the expression of someone who has just discovered that a thing they carried unknowingly, a thing they almost threw away in anger, was the exact thing the world had been turning around. "He used me twice," she said. "Dennis, he used me when I was a kid, and he used me again when he was dying. Just in different directions." She looked up. "I don't know whether to be grateful or furious." "Both," Dominic said. "They're both true at the same time." He said it the way she had heard him say something similar to Lily 24 hours ago, in a clinic hallway, plainly without softening it, because she was someone who deserved the undecorated version. She looked at him. "What happens now?" "Now it moves fast," he said. "The document goes to Catherine Voss tonight. She files it as evidence in the estate case by morning, which immediately voids Hale's injunction because the record is no longer contested. It's submitted to federal oversight. The insurance transfer goes through. And the documentation trail in those 2 pages, he gestured at the envelope, that goes to people who can act on it before Thursday, before Hale or Shade can move on the port. And Shade, Elena said, you still don't know where he is? Not yet. Dominic's jaw tightened. But Shade without the port access he needs is Shade with half an operation. Once the Thursday manifest is pulled and the shipment is rerouted, which I'm doing tonight, he has no target. He paused. He'll surface. People like Shade always surface when the thing they built stops working. His phone rang. Marco from the other room. He answered. Catherine Voss, Marco said. She read the summary I sent her. She wants to speak with Elena directly. And a pause. Dominic, Vincent Shade just contacted us. The room realigned itself instantly. How? Through Benedetti. He used Carlo as a relay. He's asking for a meeting tonight. He says he has information about what's in the Thursday shipment that you don't have, and he wants to trade it. Another pause. He says to tell you he's been inside the operation longer than you think, and that he's not the enemy you decided he was. Dominic looked at the document on the table. He thought about a shipment that was not carrying what he had been told. He thought about 2 organizations targeting the same point from opposite sides without knowing about each other. He thought about Vincent Shade disappearing at 4 a.m. and reappearing hours later through a back channel asking for a conversation. He's scared, Dominic said. Something changed for him today, and he's scared. Do we meet him? Where does he want to meet? The Benedetti restaurant. Carlo's presence as neutral ground. Dominic almost made a sound that was not quite a laugh. A man who had used his daughter as a leverage mechanism was now proposing to meet at a neutral location with Carlo Benedetti as his safety guarantee. The audacity of it was in its own terrible way somewhat impressive. Tell him yes, Dominic said. 11 p.m. and tell him to come alone. He ended the call and looked at Elena and Lily. They were both watching him with the focused attention of people who had heard enough to understand the shape of what was happening, even without the details. I have to go out, he said. Lily said, be careful. 2 words, no performance in them. Just be careful. The way you said it to someone you were not willing to lose. He looked at his daughter for a moment. Then he nodded and picked up the document envelope and walked to the door. He stopped, turned back. Elena. She looked at him. Whatever happens tonight, the document, the case, the estate, none of that is contingent on anything you do from here. Catherine Voss is already working. The process is already moving. You don't owe me anything for it. I want that to be completely clear. Elena held his gaze. I know, she said. That's why I trust it. He left. The Benedetti restaurant at 11 p.m. was a different place than it had been at 11 a.m. The lights were lower. The staff was gone. Carlo Benedetti sat at the same booth, but this time his usual performance of warmth was entirely absent. He looked like what he actually was, an old man who had made a serious mistake and was living in the middle of its consequences. Vincent Shade was already there when Dominic arrived, sitting across from Carlo, jacket on, hands on the table, visible, a deliberate posture. A man performing transparency because he understood that transparency was his only currency left. Dominic sat. He did not acknowledge either of them immediately. He looked at the table. He let the silence work for 10 seconds, because 10 seconds was often enough to tell you everything about where someone was before they started talking. Shade broke first, which told Dominic everything. The shipment is not yours, Shade said. The cargo that was added, the layer underneath the legitimate manifest that was placed there by Hale's organization, through a contractor embedded in your supply chain 14 months ago. You approved a deal you understood. What you didn't know is that someone used your infrastructure to run something underneath it. What's in the cargo, Shade? Documentation, physical records from 4 separate government operations that Hale ran between 2019 and 2022. Operations that were officially closed. Officially. He held Dominic's gaze. They're not closed, they're archived, and they're being moved through your shipment because your operation is the one channel that nobody audits at the federal level. You have enough protection, enough history, enough legitimate cover that a shipment through your port moves without the kind of scrutiny that would expose what's underneath. Hale is using my infrastructure to move his own records out of federal reach, Dominic said. He's been planning it for 14 months. Everything, Benedetti Lilly. The pressure campaign, all of it was designed to keep you occupied, reactive looking sideways while the shipment moved through without your full attention on Thursday. Carlo, who had been silent, said quietly, "He told me you were cheating me. He fed me that information. I was supposed to escalate. You were supposed to be managing a war on two fronts." He looked at Dominic with the particular shame of a man who had been thoroughly outmaneuvered. "I am sorry, that is insufficient, but it is genuine." Dominic looked at Shade. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Hale cut me out 3 days ago." Shade's voice was flat. "I was part of the original architecture. I helped design the pressure campaign. I sourced the compound for Lily, which I want to be clear was never supposed to go further than it did. She was never supposed to be harmed. It was calibrated specifically." "I know what it was calibrated for," Dominic said. The temperature of his voice dropped exactly 1 degree. Just one. But Shade stopped talking immediately. "Continue." "Hale cut me out because he found out about the Hartwell woman, about the document Dennis left her. He knew the evidence existed somewhere in the estate, and when he identified Elena as the beneficiary, he realized Dennis had been smart enough to hide it in the one place no one would look." Shade paused. "I didn't know about the document. Hale kept that from me. When I found out he'd been running a parallel track targeting a civilian, a completely uninvolved civilian, to suppress evidence that implicated both of us, I pulled back." "You pulled back," Dominic said. "I'm not—" Shade stopped. He looked at his hands. "There are things I'm willing to do in this business and things I'm not. Drugging your daughter was already at the edge of what I could justify. Going after a 24-year-old woman with a sealed juvenile record, manufacturing criminal charges, destroying the one financial lifeline she's ever had." He shook his head. "That's not a line I cross." The room was very quiet. "You drew a line," Dominic said, "after participating in drugging my daughter and engineering a conflict between me and Carlo that could have ended with people dead." He held Shade's gaze. "You want me to credit you for the line?" Shade said nothing. He had the look of a man who knew exactly how little credit he deserved and was not going to argue about it. "The records in the shipment," Dominic said. "Hale's archived operations. What are they? Programs that officially ended. Surveillance operations. 2 overseas, 1 domestic. People were hurt. Some people died who shouldn't have. Hale ran them legally at the time, but the authorization was narrow and he operated outside it consistently." Shade paused. "If those records reach federal oversight in the right hands, he loses everything. His consulting business, his clearances, his freedom." Another pause. "So do I. My name is in 2 of the 4 files." Carlo made a small sound. Dominic looked at Shade for a long time. He thought about Elena's envelope already in Catherine Voss's hands, the documentation trail in those 2 pages already being cross-referenced. He thought about a federal oversight contact Marco had called at 8:30. He thought about a manifest with 6 handwritten words at the bottom and the question of who had written them. "Who wrote on my manifest?" Dominic said. Shade looked at him. Something shifted in his face. "Dennis Hale gave me something too, before he died. A month before, he called me out of nowhere. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years. He said he'd done something that needed correcting. He said he'd written on a document." Shade paused. "He didn't tell me which one. He said when the time came, the right people would find it. Dennis Hale, a man who had spent his life on the wrong side of too many lines, who had taken a child into his home and treated her like a number in a ledger, who had been involved in government operations that killed people who should have lived, who had in the last months of a life that had accumulated more damage than redemption, tried it imperfectly quietly to leave something behind that pointed toward the truth. Not enough. Never enough. But something. Where is Hale now? Dominic said. Tonight. Where is he physically? I don't know. I've been dark since this morning. Shade reached into his jacket and placed a phone on the table. But his last communication to me before he cut me out came from this device. I kept it. There may be something on it you can use. Dominic looked at the phone. Shisham. He did not touch it. He looked at Shade. You're giving me everything, he said. Yes. In exchange for what? Shade was quiet for a moment. In exchange for the understanding that I came to you voluntarily, tonight, before Thursday, before you had everything you needed to move without me. He held Dominic's gaze. I'm not asking for immunity. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for the acknowledgement that I chose this. Dominic picked up the phone. He stood. He looked at Carlo. The 9 years are still intact. Barely. Don't test them again. Carlo nodded. It was the nod of a man who intended to spend a considerable amount of time being very quiet. Dominic looked at Shade one last time. I'll remember you came voluntarily, he said. I won't promise it changes anything, but I'll remember. He walked out. Marco had Richard Hale's location by 12:40 a.m. The phone Shade had provided contained a single communication, a location pin sent 3 hours earlier, which resolved to a hotel on the west side, not Hale's organization's property. A private booking under a third name. The kind of arrangement made by someone who was wrapping things up rather than digging in. Hale was not running, he was closing. The distinction mattered enormously. They moved at 1:15 a.m. Not with force. Dominic had made that calculation quickly and cleanly. Hale was former government. Hale had layers of legal insulation that force would only activate. What Hale did not have, as of tonight, was the document from Dennis's estate, or the 2 pages Elena had carried in her bag for 7 months, or the manifest notation, or Vincent Shade's cooperation, or a shipment that would move on Thursday morning as planned. What Hale had as of 1:15 a.m. was a hotel room and the beginning of an understanding that the architecture he had built over 14 months had just collapsed from 4 directions simultaneously. Dominic knocked. He waited. He heard movement inside. The door opened. Richard Hale looked at him the way a man looks at the person who has just arrived at the precise moment he knew was coming, but had hoped irrationally might not. He was in his shirt jacket, off the perfect posture, intact even at 1 in the morning. Gray at the temples, older in person than in photographs, the eyes of someone who had spent a career reading situations and was reading this one now with total accuracy. Mr. Corsetti, Hale said. Mr. Hale. Dominic stood in the doorway. He did not push in. He was not there to intimidate. I think we should talk. Hale stepped back. Dominic entered. Marco remained outside. They sat across from each other in the small hotel room, and for a moment neither spoke. 2 men who had spent their careers in different versions of the same business control information, the management of things that operated outside the boundaries of ordinary life, sitting across from each other at the end of a situation that had run its course. The document is with federal oversight, Dominic said. As of 40 minutes ago, Elena Hartwell's estate case was submitted as a federal record at 11:50 p.m. The insurance transfer is proceeding. The juvenile file will not be unsealed because there is no longer a criminal investigation to justify it, because the investigation never existed, and the contact who was going to authorize it was informed an hour ago that doing so would put them in the middle of a federal submission they do not want to be near. Hale was very still. The Thursday shipment is being rerouted as we speak. Your archived records will not reach their intended destination. They will instead be received by the Oversight Office along with the documentation chain Elena was carrying. Dominic held his gaze. I'm telling you this not to threaten you. I'm telling you because you are a professional and you deserve to understand the complete picture. Hale looked at his hands. He looked at the wall. He looked back at Dominic. Dennis told her to keep it, Hale said. Not a question, a realization. He knew she would. He knew she wouldn't understand it, and he knew she'd be angry, and he put it in her hands anyway because he knew that Elena Hartwell, whatever else she was, kept things. He paused. He knew her better than I thought he did. He knew her well enough to know she deserved better than what he gave her, Dominic said, and he knew what she was carrying even if she didn't. Hale was quiet for a long moment. The operations in those files, 2 of them, are not my concern, Dominic said. They're going to people whose concern they are. What happens after that is not in my hands, and I'm not trying to put it there. He leaned forward slightly. What is in my hands is the woman you spent 8 months trying to destroy, and I want to be very direct with you about that. Hale met his eyes. Elena Hartwell worked doubles at a diner because she needed the hours. She's been fighting your legal team with a legal aid attorney for 7 months. She carried a document she didn't understand in her bag every day without knowing it was the reason you were watching her. Dominic's voice was even, measured, completely without theater. She is not a casualty of this situation. She is going to come out of it with her case won, her record intact, and no further interference. That is not a negotiation. That is the shape of what comes next. Hale said, and me, that's between you and the oversight office. Dominic stood. I'm not your judge. I'm not your executioner. I'm a man whose daughter was put in an alley because you needed a distraction, and I've decided that what I want from you is not what you're afraid I want. He picked up his jacket. I want you to understand that it didn't work. Not any of it, and I want you to understand why. Hale looked at him. Something in the old intelligence professional's face, something that had been held in rigid professional position for the entirety of this conversation shifted, just slightly. Why, he said, because a 24-year-old woman with nothing went back to work the morning after one of the worst nights of her life to cover someone else's shift, Dominic said. Because she noticed a running car half a block away while she was managing a crisis, and she told me about it without being asked. Because she carried your brother's evidence for 7 months in a bag without knowing what it was, and she didn't throw it away even when she was angry enough to. He paused at the door. You built a very sophisticated operation, and it was dismantled by the person you dismissed most completely. That's not an accident. That's character. He left. In the car, Marco said nothing for the first 3 minutes. Then, Shade's information, the files. Is it enough? More than enough. Dominic looked out the window. The oversight office will do what they do. Our part is finished. And us Thursday's shipment rerouted our cargo only legitimate manifest. We're clean. We were always clean. He paused. Someone used our infrastructure. That won't happen again. He looked at Marco. I want every link in the supply chain revetted. Every contractor, every access point. Starting tomorrow. Done. They drove north. At 2:40 a.m., the townhouse was quiet. The security staff were at their positions. Dominic came in and went to the second floor and stopped at the sitting room door. It was partially open. Inside, Elena and Lily were both asleep on opposite ends of the long couch, Lily with a blanket pulled up to her chin and a book open and face down on the cushion beside her. Elena, with her jacket still on and her bag still on the floor next to her feet. The television was on volume low, some late-night program that neither of them had been watching. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. His daughter, 19 years old, sleeping on a couch in a safe house with a woman she had known for less than 48 hours, and the particular ease of her breathing, deep, trusting, genuinely at rest, was something he had not seen from Lily in years. She had always slept lightly in his world, had always seemed to carry even sleep like a weight. Not tonight. He looked at Elena. 24 years old in a diner uniform, shoes still on, still practical and self-contained, even unconscious. A woman who had been dealt so many wrong hands for so long that she had simply stopped waiting for the right one and had built something workable from whatever was available. Who had walked out a kitchen door on an ordinary night and made an extraordinary choice and changed the shape of everything that followed. He went to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the counter and drank it slowly. He thought about the 6 words on the manifest and the 2 pages in the envelope and a document that had traveled 7 months in a canvas bag through bus rides and double shifts and a legal battle that had been designed to destroy the person carrying it. Dennis Hale had been a bad man. Dominic did not traffic in rehabilitation narratives, but a bad man had done one true thing on the way out, and that one true thing had moved through the world and in the hands of the person he had wronged most, and it had arrived through a chain of events that nobody could have designed intentionally exactly where it needed to be. There was something in that, something he didn't have a clean word for. Not justice was too formal, too finished. Something more alive than that, something that moved. His phone buzzed. Catherine Voss. He answered quietly. The estate submission was accepted at 2:30 a.m., Voss said. She did not sound tired. She sounded like a woman who did her best work in the small hours. The transfer is proceeding. Elena Hartwell will receive formal confirmation by 9 a.m. The contested funds will be accessible within 72 hours. A pause. The juvenile file petition has been formally withdrawn, The contact who was going to authorize it sent a message 20 minutes ago saying he was recusing himself. Whatever you did, it worked. Thank you, Catherine. One more thing. She paused. The documentation in those 2 pages the trail Elena was carrying. The oversight office called me directly at 2 a.m. They have opened a formal review. Another pause. They said the submission was the most comprehensive, unsolicited evidence package they'd received in 11 years. He ended the call. He set the phone on the counter. He stood in the quiet kitchen of a north side townhouse at 2:50 a.m., and he let the stillness be still for a moment without filling it with the next thing. At 7 a.m., Lily woke up and found her father at the kitchen table with coffee and the Thursday Manifest in front of him, the 6 handwritten words visible at the bottom. She sat across from him. She looked at the words. "Is it over?" she said. "The immediate part," he said. "Yes." And Elena, her case is won. The money transfers in 72 hours. The people who were working against her, they're dealing with other problems now. He looked at his daughter. She's going to be fine. Lily looked at the hallway, then back at him. She doesn't have anywhere to go, does she? I mean, she has her apartment, she has the diner, but she doesn't have, she searched for the right word. She doesn't have anyone who's going to check that she's okay, who's going to call and ask how she's handling all of this. Dominic said nothing. He watched his daughter work through it. "I want to," Lily said. I want to be that person. For her." She looked at him directly. "Is that strange?" "No," he said. "It's not strange at all." Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway at 7:15. She looked at them both. She had taken her jacket off. She looked less armored than she had at any point in the last 2 days, which was either exhaustion or the particular unwinding that happened when a person was for the first time in a long time somewhere genuinely safe. "The case," she said. She was looking at Dominic. "One," he said, "as of 2:30 this morning." She stood in the doorway and said nothing for a moment. He watched her absorb it, not the performance of relief, not tears, not collapse. Just a slow, deep breath and the very quiet settlement of someone who has been holding something up for a very long time and has just been told they can put it down. "I need to call my attorney," she said. "She already called yours," Dominic said. They spoke at 6 a.m. Elena looked at him. "You didn't have to do all of this." "I know," he said. "I mean it. I found your daughter and I called you, and that was the whole of my obligation. Everything after that—" She stopped. "Everything after that," Dominic said, "was the world correcting something that should have been corrected a long time ago. I happened to be in a position to help it along." He held her gaze. "You carried that document for 7 months without knowing what it was. You stayed in that alley for 19 minutes without knowing who Lily was. You went back to work the next morning to cover someone else's shift because they needed the coverage." He paused. "At some point, the world owes a person like that something real. I'm glad it happened on my watch." Lily pushed a cup of coffee across the table toward the empty chair. Elena looked at the chair. She looked at Lily. She looked at Dominic. And then Elena Hartwell, 24 years old, who had been processed and filed and overlooked and fought and carried and endured, walked across the kitchen and sat down at the table between a Mafia boss and his daughter, and picked up the cup of coffee, and for the first time and longer than she could accurately remember, she let herself simply be somewhere she was wanted. Outside, the city moved into its morning. The port would open in 2 hours. The Thursday shipment would move under a clean, manifest, legitimate cargo, nothing underneath. The oversight office was already working through the documentation Elena had unknowingly carried for 7 months. Richard Hale was making calls to attorneys. Vincent Shade had gone back to wherever men like Shade went when their operations dissolved. Carlo Benedetti was sitting quietly in his restaurant, being very careful. And in a townhouse on the north side of the city, at a kitchen table over coffee, a father and his daughter and a waitress who had stayed when she had no reason to were talking about small things at first. Ordinary things, the kind of things that don't matter and matter enormously. And the morning came through the windows and landed on all 3 of them, unhurried and entirely ordinary, as though the world had simply decided that ordinary was exactly what they had earned. Some things cannot be planned, cannot be engineered or leveraged or structured into existence. They arrived through a kitchen door at 11 p.m. in the shape of a person who makes the right choice at the worst possible moment for no reason except that it was the right choice to make. And they change everything, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the way that real things change real lives permanently, quietly, and for good. Dominic Corsetti, who had built an empire on controlled power and the careful management of every variable, had finally met the one thing his world had no framework for. Not a threat, not an asset, not a transaction, just a person who stayed. And it turned out that was the only thing that had ever mattered.